I'm Sir Flobogen Thunderhammer.
And I'm Teflon Frosthammer.
And I'm Cabbage Tidehammer.
And this
is
WAK.
If Amtgard knighthood means anything, you can't knife a motherfucker and keep it.
And the thing that people need to understand essentially about arts and sciences events is that your scores don't matter.
Do you want a black phoenix or a white phoenix?
Jeez, language, man. We're on
right.
a freaking podcast, for fuck's sake.
Mind-blowing experience, right?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to WAK, where we discuss topics important to the Amtgard community at large and talk
Did
with
I make it before the intro ended?
Talk with interesting people from around the foam fighting world. Jesus Christ, man.
You said get me a Coke. It seemed like a good idea.
This week we have a pretty cool guest. Yeah, could you just tear me off one of those? Yeah. We've got a pretty cool guest. Xander, thank you so much for joining us. We actually wanted you on, and this is not a joke. We've talked to people from coast to coast in Canada, in New Mexico, and every single one of them were like, oh, yeah, Xander, he's been to my park dozens of times. Yeah, we know him. Like, Xander? Like the guy that used to live over here, Xander? So, yeah. Thank you so much for joining us. Tell everybody a little bit about yourself. How did you get into foam fighting? What's your backstory?
Hi, yeah. Well, thanks for having me. I mean, it, honestly, the same as most Amtgarders. I was just an awkward nerd in high school, and I found out about Amtgard at the local park. It was the park across the street from the school, literally. So, wow. I would like when I got into it, it was my first, I would honestly be what I first considered my first life addiction. I took to LARPing like fish to water, and I found it. I became obsessed with it, and that was a long time ago. And I spent the majority of my life, with the strive of going to the next event, playing the next game. I think I had, my longest stint was 2 years. I went to an event every weekend in some game, in some shape or form.
Jeez.
And life was LARPing. It started in Amtgard. I played Nero for a little while, got into the more LARPy LARP games with the numbers and stuff. Mm-hmm. I found DAG. I played that for a hot minute. I got knighted in DAG, and then recently I've started playing Darkon a little bit because I've been friends up there, and then I've played a dozen plus different LARPs in between of games that have come and gone and died, and maintained getting to meet a lot of cool people. I definitely have traveled a lot for the game and stuff like that. In my 20s, I would be I want to go fight this group of people for an extended period of time, and I would just pack up my life, move out there, fight them for a couple months, and then move back, go somewhere else.
Yeah, it's weird. We were kind of talking Xander was an Amtgard Cryptid because every community, or I guess a LARP Cryptid, because every community has some story about you, and it's kind of local to their region. So it was really interesting to just kind of see the Darkon guy's oh yeah, Xander comes out. I know he's played DAG before. He may have played Amtgard, and we're yeah, he played Amtgard. That's where he started, I think. Maybe. I don't know anymore. So what game are you currently playing right now, if you're playing anything?
I honestly, I've kind of evolved past what game am I playing, because what game am I playing is yes. I actually recently just came off of a hard 6 month no using my elbows, because I have really bad tennis elbow and a lot of physical therapy, and so I'm coming on the tail end of that. So I'm actually just now getting back into foam. But for me personally, it's always about what game. I don't care what game I'm going to play. They all play the same.
Right.
I get to fight. I get to whack. I get to do other things. I like role playing too, but I love fighting, and so that makes all games kind of have their own appeal to them.
Yeah. At the end of the day, you're still swinging a stick, so it transfers pretty well from game to game.
Right. Right now I live in Florida, and the game around us is Bell and Amtgard. Mm-hmm. And so I haven't been out to any of the parks because obviously I've been injured. But I'm going to, whenever I have the free time, whatever park lines up with my availability is the one that I'm going to go play at.
Go to one of the Neverwinter events and win. Just
honestly.
Beat Goose. That would be great.
No, it's funny. As someone with who's just recovering from tennis elbow, do you have any special words of wisdom for Jeff here?
Honestly, I neglected it for a really long time, and my biggest word of wisdom to all fighters is take your health seriously. I drove my body. Hey, look, I grew up with him. All right, we grew up fighting together. We both drove our bodies like we stole them. And that is not how you maintain a long fighting career.
Fair enough.
But if you have tennis elbow, see a doctor if you have the health insurance. If not, I suggest the TheraBand to a lot of people. I actually have it right here.
Yeah,
It's like a twisty
I need
thing.
to go get one of those.
They're lit. Like, I do it every day, and it is the one physical therapy at home thing I've done that has actually given me progress. I take it that's why I pimp it so much. It was given to me by one of my unit mates he drives ambulances, so he knows a lot of that kind of stuff, and he told me to check it out, and it worked out really well for me. But take your injuries seriously, because you only get one body.
Just pulling for cybernetics. No, like, I'm legit doing physical therapy for tennis elbow and golf elbow to some degree too, for the past, like, I don't know, 4 to 6 weeks, something like that. So
When do we get our own elbow? When do we have enough injured people that we get like
Amped
boffer
guard elbow?
Yeah, just boffer elbow. So you have we mentioned this a little earlier.
Oh, wait, hold on. That last segment was brought to you by our sponsors, TheraBand. Thank you.
Yeah.
boy, we could use that one.
Jeez.
Yeah, right. The TheraBand, if you'd like to sponsor us, we're desperate.
They're not interested.
No one at TheraBand thinks about us.
You've got a strong customer base.
Yeah, right. So we mentioned this, or you mentioned this a little earlier, but you've ended up playing a lot of games. Your outlook very much became I want to play anything. We have been doing this not really reoccurring segment, but as we find people that we think would be interesting segment, where we bring on people from other games. We had Telfair on, who talked to us about Bell and Dag. We've had the Darkon crew on.
Kai, Fikes, Bard.
Yep.
Bradby.
Thank you.
MVP.
Yeah.
I love that man. That man is the nicest human I've ever met in my life. Sorry. Anyway.
He's certainly gave off the same vibe on the show, so
Yeah.
good to know. Gorg?
Yeah, had Gorg.
I heard yeah.
So one of the reasons that we wanted to talk to you is you have a unique perspective. We have a lot of people in Amp-Guard or Bell or Dag that will cross game, and cross game for us is kind of narrowly defined as someone who will do Amp-Guard and Bell and Dag. It's but that's not really what true cross gaming is. I consider a true cross gamer. You go and do everything. So one of the things that we really wanted to talk about was some commonality that you've found between all of these different games that you've played, and I'm even going down to like some of the LARP games. I say down to, not as derogatory, the and then across all the way to like the most combat heavy game that you've played. What are some things that you found that you think that they do well? What are some things that you found that you think that that the communities could improve on?
Okay. So one big thing I want to like touch on with like the first thing about being such a true cross gamer is that doing so many LARPs, I know there's like an old stigma, especially like back in the day of LARPing, where like other LARPs hated other LARPs.
Oh yeah,
and viewed them as like poaching and stuff like that. And I've always hated that because there are so many LARPs types because there are so many different individual needs.
Yep.
And I think that as a community, the more we focus on that, and like as like a true cross gamer, like you said, I've always thought about that, is that when I meet somebody new that wants to get into LARPing, I'm like, all right, cool. What do you want? What do you want out of your game? Like, what do you want? Do you want to like dress up to the nines and hear a story? Do you want to go out and push somebody over and like really get aggressive with it? Like, are you somewhere in the middle? Okay, cool. Then this is the game for you. Yeah. Like, there are so many different LARPs, and each honestly has its own niche of people. There are like some commonalities between them, but I really do say that the number one commonality is that we're all just like kind of like nerds at the end of the day. But every LARP does kind of attract like a similar, I don't want to say like type of nerd, because there's obviously like the variety in everything. But even when you've played so many different games, you get to see like there's a lot of people that they'll go to a game and they won't have a lot of fun, and then they just won't get into LARPing because they'll hear their friends bashing the other games they're playing, the other games that they could hear about. Like, oh, well, you don't want to play Dag. Those guys are just jerks. No, Dag compared to Amp-Guard is just a heavier contact game, and it has a heavier play style. So if like that's what you're craving, like if you're out in Amp-Guard and you were like swinging for the fences, you want to swing a greatsword like a greatsword, that's Amp-Guard's not the place for that, homie. But let me show you this other game.
Yeah.
And that like that's the biggest thing that I think like really like sets things apart. Plus, But as far as every game has its own unique type of differences. Like certain games they'll be all about like staying up and fighting as much as they can at night versus other games that want to do all of their fighting at day. Like a fun LARPing fact is that if you've never been to a Nero event I don't know, I haven't played in a long time, but it used to be, I would say 80% of the combat was after the sun was down.
That's interesting.
You would start on Friday night. It would start at like 10 o'clock if you were lucky, if not midnight. You would literally fight until the sun came up. The young people would stay awake and start doing things. Everybody else would go take a nap. And then like they would build up this whole giant field battle every time, and the field battle would never happen during the daylight. Which like it honestly it sounds like, as people that get hit in the face a lot with night fighting, it sounds kind of awful, but their fighting culture was so different that like honestly you weren't getting whacked in the face like 100 times. Yes, it happened because nobody's perfect, but it didn't honestly happen any more than it did at like a normal day battle, like a day fight for me.
Right.
Mm-hmm. That's really cool.
But like because they did that, like as somebody that ran the games, it is easier to create immersion at night. When I can like have like darkness and shadow to like create my looming dark figure is a lot better than a dude in a black robe in the middle of the day. Like one of these can look significantly cooler.
You look hot. Are you hot?
Yeah.
You needed water?
The Nike swoosh doesn't show up so good at night. You know?
But it's also like you said, the Nike swoosh, it's even down to like costuming levels. Like down to knowing what type of costuming level you want to do can help determine like what kind of game you want to get into. Like what genre of costuming, even from like how fantasy or realistic do you want to go? Are you one of the people that love realism, that realistic outfits? You don't want to fight at all, but you love realistic outfits? Boy, you should check out the SCA.
Yeah.
Like, you know, because SCA is a LARP. I don't care what anybody says.
Yeah,
They're pretending to be knights. Like, live action role play.
It's in the name, yeah.
But as far as the differences, I've always qualified them as light, medium, and heavy. So light LARPs are like Nero, different games like that. Most games that use like lightest touch, heroic, things like that. Anything that were like a lot of the latex games, because you don't want to be like swinging latexes full tilt and stuff like that. And they always have like smaller swords and whatnot. And then you have medium games. Amtgard is what I consider a medium contact game.
Yeah.
And I actually consider DAG in the same category, but it's like a high medium. And the reason being is that SCA is where you hit hard. Mm-hmm. Like hard is you need to wear armor to play this game.
Yeah.
Like that's a level of aggression.
And they have like real sufficient force rules, not like that was light, but like no, you hit me, but it just doesn't count. That wouldn't have impacted my armor hard enough to rattle me in a real world setting.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And that's what makes it the toppest of the like LARP tiers. And I know that we get other outside of that where like Battle of the Nations and whatnot, but that's more of a sport than like I would consider a LARP just because of the way it is played. Like the way, like the presentation of it, you know. But everybody has their own preferences, and I think players figuring that out is the best way to getting to their idea of fun. Right. At the end of the day, like we should be all having fun. Everybody has different ideas of it.
Dude, I normally wait until towards the end to do a wrap up too, but I really want to tie a bow on a point that you've made here, and that is just that it's not the mid-aughts anymore where, you know, Amtgard and Belagarth and Daga here and all of these other games and SCA all hate each other and mock each other. I'm sure that some of that still exists, but you should go out and try all of these games. Don't go out with a chip on your shoulder or a preconceived notion because you've heard other people talk. Give it an honest try and see which one is going to be the best for you. Yeah. That's really what I was picking up from what you were saying.
Gone are the days that the Daga Hero forums disallowed any mention of any other game and stuff like that. So I think that's really good. It was. Yeah.
Holy shit. Like if you mentioned Amtgard, it would be like a no-no.
It was Amtgard, Belgarth, anything.
They would just delete the post.
You couldn't. One of the page rules is that you could not direct a player to another game.
Interesting.
Which,
I've never seen that since I started looking back into things.
It's a very isolating like tactic, and I think it honestly caused way more harm than it ever did good.
Oh yeah.
It's probably why they don't do it anymore. If we're
being encouraging it definitely helps.
Yeah, I was gonna say you learned that you. I was trying to remember the old saying: "You catch more flies with honey." There's enough game for all of us. People will play both.
Yeah, well, it's not a zero-sum game, right? If you're playing Amtgard, it does not mean that you are never playing Dagger here. You can play both.
The only caveat to that would be like if both parks are meeting in the same city on the same day. But that's really just talking to each other and be like, yo, can we split the days? Somebody do Saturday, somebody do Sunday, and then we just work together.
Yeah.
And I've lived in a lot of cities where that's prevalent. Like I lived off and on in Atlanta for a little while. I've lived in other cities where there has been multiple games within the city, and usually there are like I've only seen I've only really heard of instances where people are like because of grudges they refuse to like give, but most of the time it's like okay, cool, we're gonna go play Amtgard on Saturday and play Dag on Sunday. Like when I lived in Atlanta, that's how it is. Like Amtgard Park's on Saturday, Dag's on Sunday. If you want to do both, you can do both in a weekend.
Yeah. So, having jumped from game to game, what is the biggest, I don't want to say culture shock, but what is the biggest shock you've had going from one game to the next where it was like a completely different type of player or it was a completely different rule set that sort of threw you for a loop? What's the biggest sort of difference you've noticed going from one to the other?
Honestly, I didn't really have any culture shock. I grew up playing D&D in high school. Like even before I found this, I played D&D. So I've like before I ever read my first Amtgard rulebook, which back then was way long.
Yeah.
I had read like dozens of like D&D books and tabletop books. So when I read a LARP book, I was like, oh, this is the same thing. It's just a set of rules. And so usually within reading the rules, like I can tell like how the combat's going to go. I'll be like, oh, okay, that makes sense. This is probably the habits and things that people have. And then every game has its own caveats, and you can always tell that within the rules.
Yeah. So 2 points really quick. One, how dare you? We made that book by stealing a perfectly good Dagger here rule book.
Even the art.
Yeah, even the art. I think we've moved away from
Xander's
that.
not that old in Amtgard. He came in at V6, I think.
No?
Would you
I was in
V5?
V5.
Shit.
Yeah, I was. You got to remember, I was in Amtgard long before I met you.
Okay, fair
like,
enough.
Yeah, like you guys met me probably 2 or 3 years into.
Gotcha.
Like, because I didn't have the money to travel. I was just a poor kid. I was a poor high school kid. I could walk to my park. It was a long walk, but I could get there.
Fair enough.
The other point, though, that I wanted to get to, and when you answered that, it kind of was what I had hoped to hear, that there's nothing so big and so culturally different that you can't try another game out. Like you said, I mean, everything's kind of predictable, and if you've read one rule book, you can read the other one and interpret what's going on. So, I mean, if you are going like, hey, I want to check out Dag, it's not going to be that much of a shock to you.
So like the biggest, so it wasn't a shock to me because I'm so flexible.
Sure.
But I think the biggest advice for other people is that when you read the rule book, be aware that you're playing another game. Like one of the biggest things that drive me crazy is that honestly, having played like all 3 tiers of games, are the people that always fight at the same tier no matter what game they're at. And so like that biggest time I see that is between medium and light games. So like people will go from like Amtgard or even Dag, and then they will go into these light combat games with swords that are half as thin, or even like their normal swords, and they will be like swinging Dag swings and whatnot on people that like are expecting you to tap them.
Yeah.
And then they're getting mad at like I mean I definitely like I have been guilty of this in the past, and I'm saying this from a point of growth. And so, like, I want to be honest about that. And so, like, but getting mad at that person that you hit too hard, like when you genuinely hit them too hard. I'm not talking about, like, a different thing. Like, you're genuinely just falling into your habits.
Yeah.
You know? You should be aware you're playing a different game, especially when you're crossing tiers. Like, even from Dag to Amtgard. Like, Amtgard has, like, it's definitely not, like, light. But at the same time, I don't need to swing at the same force that I do with Dag at Amtgard, right? Especially not like in the general sense. Like, yes, is acceptable? Yes. But is it appropriate? Not always. Like there are appropriate force levels for everything. And when you're like forcing your level at somebody, that's definitely not inclusion of the fun. And that's not to say like dumb down your power, like your fighting ability, but it's saying control your muscles. Like
yeah, you can
don't
still
need
throw
to crush
fast
people
without
right.
Injuring someone.
Exactly. I know that like I've heard plenty of people try to tell me, oh, I'm swinging fast, that's why I hit so hard. Like, and I'm like, bruh, like, don't come at me with that. Like,
yeah.
I will prove you wrong. You're swinging fast because you're not stopping your swing. Like, it's a foam game. We're not trying to go through them. We're trying to touch them.
Yeah.
And that's like the biggest thing is that you as the player should be respecting the game you're playing, not trying to force your game on another game.
So
I think is the point I was trying to get to.
Yeah, no. I definitely can work with that, and I mean, I guess an interesting thing would be knowing what the sufficient force is for those games before you jump in. But I mean, that's something people can find in the rule book, or they can find out by asking. We don't have to go through each one here.
Most games also, like, having played a lot of games, pretty much every game for the most part has this is opening ceremonies. Have you never been to a game before? Come here. Like, especially the lighter touch games. Yep. If you have never been to a game, almost always they require you, whether you've played other LARPs or not, to come to the new player ceremony. And it's specifically to be like, there's a combat introduction of, this is how you're expected to hit people. You know, I've done the part. I've also been like on the other side of it. I've been through dozens of them playing different games. But it's always respectable to go through them so that you can know what to expect, not only of yourself, but of the people around you, so that you're not like creating a problem where there doesn't need to be one.
Yeah. I think it was when we talked with the folks from Darkon, they mentioned that they do that new player introduction, and then the new players for the first event, they're serving as like the King's Guard, I think it was. And that seemed like a really cool way to like get into the game and also have a group to play with without having to like sort of just force yourself into those situations. I like that as a concept. Also, I think the first event for new players was free. I'm not sure.
It is.
Yeah, Darkon.
Okay.
Was the one that did that.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
No, you first.
I was going to say a lot of the kind of LARPy LARPs and stuff like that do have that too. Not all of them. Some of them do.
I think this is an area where Amped could improve, because I don't think we do that really.
We don't.
It's usually like a one-on-one, like, oh, hey, you're new. Yeah, come here for a second. I'll show you how it works.
So the other big difference I also give you, though, is that unlike a lot of these games, well, Darkon is obviously the exception. They practice twice a month. But is that Amped is a weekly free practice, whereas like it is very unlikely that you are coming to Amped having never fought Amped.
True.
Like to an event. Yes, it does happen. I'm not saying it doesn't, but more than likely you've shown up to a weekend park, played for free a couple times, and you're like, awesome, this event looks dope.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Whereas like LARPy LARPs, like these kids are literally like, I heard about LARPing. These LARP swords are so cool. I've never seen one before. And then that, like, just the introduction to those events, and that's why I think it's a really big deal that they're free, is because, like, LARPy LARP, for example, is very expensive compared to other games. Mm-hmm. You go from, like, Amped's, like, $20, $30 events up to $60, $70 events very quickly. Like, $60 is, like, probably the average price for a LARPy LARP event. Jeez, and it's because the presentation is more. Like, at a good game, that money is being funneled back into the game very well. Like, I have played games with insane levels of costuming. Mm-hmm. So, like, where I didn't, like, have a dude walk up to me and be like, he's in a tabard. What are you? Oh, you're an ice elemental. Let me use my imagination. Yeah. No, I played a game where they were like, I looked up and I was like, that's a demon.
Yeah. I remember Hero did a kind of steampunky LARPy LARP game for a while where you were required to be in full costume.
Elsewhere. It was actually ran by Lawwell.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I didn't know that.
No shit.
Yep.
Wow.
It was a really good game. I played its whole life.
He's playing something else now too. What was it called?
Hero
Apocalypse Rising?
Yeah, Hero.
Yeah.
I think it is Apocalypse.
Something like that.
It's got Apocalypse.
I didn't know what the name was. I didn't know if it was either going to be that or there's another like World War II LARP that I think is starting up in Chattanooga-ish.
Oh, neat.
Man,
but I don't know the details of it. Not my genre. So
a World War II LARP seems so fraught with risk. I don't know that I would. Which side are we on? Well, put this armband on and go stand over there. I'm gonna go.
I can't wear my costume out to the park. I have to wait till I get there to put it on.
Nope. I'm firmly out.
But I mean, like I said, everybody has their genre. There's a genre for everybody. There's sci-fi. There's any like reenactments LARPing. I'm sorry, people,
absolutely.
but like.
Speaking of the sci-fi, have you? Because I've looked a little bit, and I have not found one that's anywhere near the Southeast.
EVE Online. If you just play that game, that is LARPing.
Yeah, that's just AFK Hero, man.
It's spreadsheets, but yeah.
I will say that sci-fi is the one genre that like. There have been like some potential LARPs, but they never came to fruition. And it's because it's one of those games where the people that are running it would want to present such an immersive experience, and it's really hard to do with the limitations of like event sites. Like you guys have run events plenty of times. You know that like even running LARP events, we have a very selective group of campsites we can use in most states. And so like it was always coming down to it was just going to be too much. Mm-hmm. And so they didn't want to not do it the deserving justice. And that is why, like, I know that there's been other games that have introduced different things. Like, for a while, there was a game called Ides.
Ides, yeah.
And they had they were like a colonial / fantasy kind of thing too, and they did a really good job of their costuming and everything.
Yeah.
But that's why everybody like
was good.
They kept shifting towards anything that they could rep well. Like I know a lot of people got tired of the like high fantasy, so that's why in Tennessee for a little while we had the colonial era of LARPies, like more like Fable 2 kind of like.
Oh, yeah. I like that. Shit, you said Fable 2 and now I'm in. that wasn't hard at all. I feel like for a true sci-fi LARP in real sci-fi fashion, they'll skip that entirely. They'll go straight to like VR. Like I don't know if you've played there's a Star Trek bridge crew simulator for VR, and that is so good. Like that is.
Is it Artemis the one you're talking about, or a different one?
No, there's an actual like Star Trek bridge
okay.
simulator.
Gotcha.
It may have been like they called it that and then had to rename it because of licensing. I don't know, but it's been a while. But like I feel like they would almost skip physical events entirely and just do some immersive VR environment.
Oh, dude, Xander, could you imagine like a full dive? A full dive set with LARPy LARP.
Hey, listen, if we let Mark Zuckerberg reign unchecked, we might have it, and not necessarily in the way you want very soon.
There was I know this isn't LARP related, but there was I'm blanking on the word. Somebody basically was making a VR program on one of the crowdfunding websites that was like a D&D thing, but it had like dozens of environments that you can like as the DM change, people get to customize their avatar and it's how other people see them. Oh, shit. And like you can like summon a D&D table to like do combat at will and like change through different characters as the DM.
That'd
and
be
like
awesome.
it had like the trailers for it looked. I know they completed it, and so I'm really like hoping to see it, and I can't remember the name of it.
Every time that we summon the
Baldur's Gate 4.
Yeah, right?
Every time that we summon the table, do I get to yell, "It's time to duel"?
Hey, if you want to.
Dog, I hate to tell you this, but if you have a VR headset right now, that's a thing.
Oh, I didn't know that.
It's Yu-Gi-Oh! With the dual discs. Yeah.
Hey, I have questions about this later.
Yeah.
So, the major events that some of the different games put on, there's a different flavor to how all of those go down. Dag and Bell, for example, I know don't do anywhere near as many events as Amtgard because Amtgard's usually done on the kingdom level, where Dag and Bell, as I understand it, the major events are done more of a national level. Do you have a preference one way or another? Is there one presentation that ends up being better, you think?
I think it comes back to being personal preference and like what you want out of the event. So like using Dag Bell and then like Amtgard, like even Dag and Bell have similar flows because I mean they're basically the same game.
They have flows? Oh, that's awesome.
Whereas Amtgard is completely different, like event structure, how the whole event is run. And I think it really just comes down to like what you want to see out of the event. And I think a lot of it comes down to nightlife, like what happens when the sun goes down. Because an event is an event. If the sun's up, you have a set amount of scenarios that you're doing. You do the scenarios, and then after that, is where like the change happens. Like what happens at that point? Because in Amtgard events, like we have court. They always have a court. Dag and Bell, like some Bell events have court, but Dag events don't really have court. You have like feast, and then everyone's kind of in an area, but there's never like court because there's not an award system, obviously. So you look like you had something to say.
I was just like making a note for myself. I have something to say, but finish your thought first.
And so like that flow is when I talk about like what are you wanting from the events is so Amtgard more has like I would say chiller vibe. Like a lot of Amtgard events I went when I was still going to events, like we often had ditch lights, like a good light fighting circle, like night fighting circle for the people that want to just fight all night. Like Lord knows that was for me for years. And so, but that's great. And then you had like the light, like chill hanging out, like people are just kicking it. Whereas Dag and Bell tend to be more like there is less often night fighting. There is more often like partying, like people like drinking and being merry and having like campfires. Like when my first biggest pull to Dag for me it was around one of the times I got injured. And so like I went to an event and I could literally just walk from camp to camp, like hanging out with all these different people, talking to them in their fires. And that was just, like a certain level of like openness during an era of like clickiness that made the game have a big pull to me. And so it's always kind of been that where there's just like a giant, it's almost kind of like Ren Fairy. There's just a giant congregation of people at night that are just drinking and doing things. Some events have had night fighting, like the Eastwind site when it was built had a arena built for night fighting.
Oh yeah.
Specifically for that, and that allowed us to run our tournaments at night because that's another big difference. Dag and Bell often ended up running their tournaments at night, whereas Amtgarders are like, oh, it's tournament day. Okay, there's a 6-hour block for tournaments. That's just where they're gonna be. Whereas they're so big with their field fighting, they care so much about it that they will not let you run tournaments during the day. It is why the tournaments get ran at night, because they don't want to pull people away for the games, and that's fine. I get it. I understand the concept, but that's why it was so important that like Eastwind, we had such a good, well lit night fighting ring. Is because like I wanted to run good tournaments, and if we're gonna have to run tournaments at night, it needs to be like the day in the space that we are fighting. So but that's just another like difference in preferences. So like people that want to fight during the day, they want to get their tournaments out during the day. They don't mind going to a tournament day. That's why those people go to Amtgard events. Like you don't see Dag Bell tournament days, but if I want to go spend 6 hours fighting in a tournament, I can go to an Amtgard event like pretty reliably. Like a Kingdom event's gonna have a Warlord tournament or some style of tournament for me to really get that in.
Yes.
Whereas like a DAG events are loosely organized because it's just a different type of tournament culture. Like the average player has a different view of tournament culture, I guess. It's like there's just I asked somebody that ran the tournaments a lot. Like there's so many people that you had like if we have a very limited time frame. We had about 3 hours where we could take the ring up and then that was it. And so we had to run like tournament brackets with hundreds of people, and we had to keep everything going super fast. And that's why we couldn't really do that's why like the culture evolved differently. Like doing pits at Winter War as an example would be a lot more difficult with just because it's nighttime, everything's louder, there's a lot going on, and it makes doing the Warlord style tournaments more difficult. So we always just did like random, we basically called it random fucking draw. We would just grab 2 people, make them fight, and we did a bracket that way. Make them stand on opposite sides. We just move them back and forth. Our winners' piles would get smaller and smaller. And then we were able to do, like, I could run a 200-person bracket in, like, 30, 40 minutes. Because we were just 4 rings and just funneling them.
And just run them through.
But it was a way that ran tournaments in that game that people finally accepted a tournament culture. Because we were now in night entertainment less than getting in everybody's way. But in Amtgard, we have always had tournaments in Amtgard. So spending a bunch of hours on tournaments is normal. It's a normal part of the thing. Whereas in the other cultures, I guess I really think it has a lot to do with the lack of like a reward system. And those other games, because it doesn't have that, the tournaments are just for the people that care about fighting in tournaments. They're for the stick jocks.
This is what I was gonna say earlier when I put my hand up, was that it occurs to me, because you're not the first person to say this, and many people have said that, when we're talking about Dagger here, their events are way more immersive, and they have, whole weekends worth of stuff scheduled that is all one big quest line or one big battle sort of build up. And it occurs to me the reason we don't have that in Amtgard is because we have this rigid award structure, and Kingdom level events are kind of required to put up certain opportunities for people to earn those awards. And so, yeah, like you sort of hit the nail on the head. That's what I was like, the thought I was coming up with was that, and then you said basically exactly what I was thinking. So I wonder, I guess, and this isn't a question that I think any of us can answer with a simple yes or no, but like, is that worth it? Could Amtgard benefit from having a looser structure where we can do more immersive stuff? Or, I'm speaking from a very Amtgard-centric lens. Or is it worth it to keep those awards the way that they are and sort of as earnable and achievable as they are now?
So as a big prevalent cross gamer, I will say that the award system of Amtgard is one of the unique things that makes Amtgard Amtgard. Amtgard would not be the game it is in the world of LARPing without its award system. Straight up, hands down. And so that's why I think that there are so many cross gamers that come into Amtgard because they want the recognition. Like how many times have you seen like a Dag Garber come in who is already like insane and then just start slamming out their orders? And it's because they deserve it. Like they're obviously skilled enough, but their game didn't have that. They didn't have that opportunity, but they came to Amtgard to get that opportunity. And you get that everywhere from game service to crafting to fighting. And that's like a big part of the draw of Amtgard to me personally, I think, is that because it has those award systems, it rewards the people that want that out of their LARP. So like,
I was gonna say Amtgard is at its root, in a way, an individualist game. If you look at it from the award structure system, because everything is awarded to you as a person and not to a group necessarily, that makes that matters, right? Because the way the ladders lead to the belts are individualistic, more or less.
You added the caveat that matters, and I'm just gonna say the WAK podcast crew got an Order of the Flame recently, but you said a word that matters, so you're not wrong. Or are you going to give out awards on the podcast?
No, this is our Order of the Flame that we received as a group.
Yeah, speaking of awards.
And here's some awards for you that I was supposed to hand you a while back.
God damn it. Why are we like this?
I've had these for years.
Sorry, Xander. Flo.
Oh, hey, this is the 6 rows. That's kind of big. Congratulations. I don't know when I got
Did you really not give these to him yet?
No.
Oh, my God.
So that's kind of the thing that I wanted to ask you about too, is since you are the big cross gamer, right? How often do you run into more of the, I guess, individual styled games versus community driven or team driven games? Is there a thing in the rules that you can look at and be like, oh, this is going to be one of those types of games or things like that?
So I will say that AmpGuard is like you said, the most individualism because of the order that drives. Remember earlier I said that there's a different personality of people within each game, as a general unit. Obviously every type of person exists within every game,
right?
But the average person is going to fit a certain, not to say stereotype, but a fit. They match a certain something. And when you get into that, AmpGuard, I think one of the reasons is I've heard a lot of different people talk about, because it's so singularly award driven, it creates that I'm going to win, screw the other guy mentality. Really hard, because especially in your it's competition, and it's especially if you are in sudden competition and you didn't live a competitive life and learned how to for good sportsmanship and all of that other good competitive behavior we learn if you did sports or something competitive growing up. Whereas people that didn't develop that skill don't have that, and then the competition gets more aggressive. And so that's why I think people in that singular mindset creates that, whereas a lot of the other games honestly don't have that. For me personally, when I branched out of AmpGuard, the biggest pull to all these other games was the centricness of the body rather than the singular. And Dagon Bell is a big prevalent of that. And I think a part of that has to do with the lack of an individual award system, means that the glory, if it were, is always held in group activities, because it's just the fights. There's no other type. It's just the scenarios. So if your unit, you have to be a unit to beat the other unit. You, an individual fighter, is not going to smoke 20 dudes. Yes, you might be if you're that good, but the average fighter is not. And so everything becomes more about we as a group need to conquer this hill.
Yeah.
Because it is a group versus group, because there's no singular calling out of the individual. I noticed when I switched from DAG to AmpGuard you have is if somebody has a bad rep, that name all the time. I heard individual names more often than I heard units all the time. Whereas when I got into DAG, if one person in your unit has a fucking rep, I'm sorry, has a rep.
We cuss all of the time.
Yeah,
okay.
we have somebody saying fuck in our intro.
So you're right. Yeah. If one person has that rep, your whole unit is and you're not actively not doing anything about it, your whole unit is viewed as being the same, whether you are or not. And that is a big cultural thing that I noticed a lot when I first swapped games.
Flo, I think you're about to make a point.
Yeah,
that was the end of my thought.
Yeah, no, it's funny that the reputation of individuals affects the reputation of a group in anything you do. Absolutely anything you do. Except that we want to pretend like it doesn't in certain scenarios. And it's good to see that some of the other games don't do that. And I hate to be this guy, but I'll go ahead and say that thing that we all know. There is a bad way to socially pressure people to make changes, and there's a positive way to do it. And where we may teach people, hopefully, at its best, AmpGuard might help people fall into that how to be a good sport and be competitive but still be a really cool person. Again, at its best. I feel like the other games, at their best, would be helping influence change through social pressures in that positive way?
I actually about social pressures. I think that social pressures are very useful, and I think that honestly, playing LARP as long as I have, if you do not apply pressure to someone, they are going to keep cheating. They're going to keep doing the thing, and I have no shame saying this because this is one of the biggest things that was about my belt in DAG. My goal was to make a running tournament system. When I first joined Dagger here, nobody wanted to fight in tournaments because everybody was getting cheated, and they were, because Heralds didn't do anything. And so when I stepped in, I started helping. We started finding people that were willing to be loud, finding people that were willing to literally shame you for cheating. And once people started getting publicly put on blast, things changed.
Yep.
And it's because you could no longer step in and do it. If you were going to cheat, you are going to be known as a cheater. They're the days of they don't do that is over. If you as fighters that know the names of the people that are probably going to cheat you. Yeah. Their faces because they have that rep. But when you're quiet about it, they get to just keep doing it. Whereas I've literally seen people that people just straight up refuse to fight. I've seen a park where there was a guy that came out and he kept he was blowing off everybody's shot, and so literally everybody stopped taking his hits. Yeah. Everybody just completely ignored him.
Well, especially nowadays too, everybody's got a phone and every fight ends up on TikTok somewhere. So there's even more I go to the TikTok comments of every amped guard or every fighting video, and they're like, "Was that a shoulder shot?" And I'm like, oh, "Fucking God!"
And that honestly, it's a great thing and a bad thing because a lot of people don't understand that without multiple camera angles, I'm sorry, there is no way to guarantee that what you think you saw was there.
No, we were joking about one of the TikToks that was put up on the Radiant Valley that Vidalia took.
Yeah, Lucas is shrugging the shit out of me.
Just my move.
In the video, it looks like the shot landed. If you're just sitting on your couch somewhere watching this video, you're like, oh, this is a video of that dude blowing it. But the two people sitting beside me that were in the video are like, no, that didn't land.
No, I actually, so the one he's referencing is a TikTok where Jeff and I are fighting sword and board in a tournament. And I literally, when that went up, because Vidalia is my fiance and she does all the posting and shit, I didn't know that was going up. So when it went up, I was like, oh, that's bad. I was like, oh no. So I had her send me the video, and then I watched it like I was Peyton Manning in the quarterback's room, rewatching the footage, back and to the left, watching it in slow-mo. And finally I thought to turn the fucking sound on. And when I did that, Jeff, at the end of the video is, sorry for the face. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's what happened there. Fuck. I spent an hour and a half watching the 4 seconds of contact to find out that the audio wasn't there, and I had to just turn it on.
But to your point, the culture has shifted now to at least the people that are around here going, no, that's not what happened. What are you trying to do to me? Because the videos, you're right, can be deceiving.
It's even the fight, eyes can be deceived. So one big thing I noticed, going through my year, trying to teach people how to herald, is that if the two people in front of you both agree how the fight ended, they both absolutely are agreeing about how the fight ended. It is not your job to tell them how the fight ended.
Yeah, no joke.
Your job is to be that help miscommunication and missed calls. And I am saying this 100%. Nobody on this planet is perfect. No, right, not a single person. I know a video in my head where I can remember where because of the camera angle, I 100% can't tell if I cheated or not. I might have gotten hit there. I stepped back screaming for help for the Heralds, because that's in my job. My eyes what their job is.
Yeah.
But even watching the video, I'm like, ooh, did that hit or not? And I feel bad. This fight was years ago.
Yeah.
But I didn't notice it the first time, but I caught it rewatching old videos, and I was like, I feel bad about that. I don't know if I did or not. And because videos can lead to that misview.
Man, there's so many.
And even then, people can miss things. But that's why if you miss something and the Herald because fighters getting so mad at Heralds for calling them. Is what makes it to where these people that are really trying their best hesitant to say something to you. I'm known as a relatively honorable fighter. I have absolutely had somebody say, hey, you got stabbed there, and me going, oh, you're absolutely right. Recounting in my head, realizing I had 5 layers of leather in one spot, and was like, That's where that shot landed, where I didn't feel nothing, but I saw a sword leave my vision.
Yeah.
And I literally stepped back and said, dead. Like, there was no argument. There's no discussion. That's their job. So the easier that everybody involved makes it, the easier the whole the whole flow of everything goes. But we're all playing a game. Like, we used to say that, you're going to get to fight again. Like,
you're not really dead. Chill. It's fine.
Yeah. I mean, and this is you touched on this a second ago. For those that don't know, Xander mentioned his knighting earlier. It primarily, as I've understood it, was for setting up this system of reaving in, was it DAG that you did?
So what it was that it was literally just that, like I said, there was no respect for tournaments. Nobody took them seriously. And so I looked at my knight and I said, I'm going to make them take tournaments seriously. And then I started at a local level, and I ran all the way up to running what is, my friends have said, is one of the best run tournaments they've ever been to, at Ragnarok, which is the flagship DAG event.
Which is all online, by the way. You can actually go look at that tournament. It is still online, and it's there's a lot of reaves on the field.
Yeah, the biggest bracket was 7v7, and I had a personal rule that for team tournaments, I should not have less than 2 heralds per fighter. Mm-hmm. So I think I ended up having 36 heralds that day.
But the point that I wanted to make, I wanted to, like, I was kind of setting up a credential moment there for you to then go on to this next point. These people that are volunteering to be reeves aren't your enemy. I remember that.
I'm just fucking with you.
I remember that in Winter's Edge, I used to always give a speech when we started because I had some bad calls made against me, and I had made some bad calls as a reeve. I used to give a speech when I started that said, hey, my name's Flo. I'm going to be one of your reeves. I introduce all of the reeves, give them names so that the fighters remember that these are people that they're dealing with. And I would say...
Yeah, and who to fucking spy on.
And who to spy on, right. I always introduce myself by saying I do accept bribes, but none of you are probably wealthy enough to pay me off.
It's $20. That's the worst part. It's just $20 to bribe Flo.
A crisp $20 bill. But I would say, hey, so I want to break down what's going on. This is going to be active reaving. It will start with the 2 fighters in the ring making a call. If you both agree what happened, this is what happened. It'll move from there on to, if something is missed, we will be calling it. There is a chance that at one point, someone, one of the 6 or 7 reeves that you see sitting here, is going to make a call that you disagree with. I'll even use, in this hypothetical, we'll just make a bad call. We're not the bad guys. We're not doing it because we hate you. We are trying to do the absolute best job that we can. Combat is quick paced. If you want to have a quick discussion about it, you can. The other fighter is more than welcome to say, no, reeve, that's not what happened. My shot missed. But the reeves call will stand outside of a conversation between the 2 fighters. You're more than welcome to discuss it with the reeve afterward. Again, all of us are happy to sit down and talk to you. And I had to do that in a recent tournament that I was in, go up and talk to 2 of the fighters about an exchange that happened between them. I pulled them both aside afterwards, and I said, hey, I wanted to talk to you about the thing. But it's tough for someone, really, no matter who you are, to go into the ring and say, oh my gosh, I had to make a call against Sir Xander. I had to make a call against Squire Teflon. And these are... In this situation, these are big names, comically we can shake our head, but for a lot of people, that is a tough thing to do.
Oh, yeah.
That is a very long conversation just to point out that the fighters that are in the ring, you should have a discussion before you start about exactly how the reaving is going to go. And then the fighters in the ring need to show a level of respect to the reeves as well, and realize that I know that tempers can get hot especially when you've got that super competitive face on, but they are trying to help and do their best. And I think that gets lost, at least in Amtgard, on occasion.
Yeah, well, and for Amtgard reaving especially, a tip for Amtgard reeves is establish dominance by calling the first sword knight to step in dead. Just outright, don't even throw a shot, you're dead. That'll set the tone for the rest of the fight.
It's usually Zeb, and so, it's fun to call him dead anyways.
So
please don't do that. He'll take
on
it out
your
on me.
point. It's in my video on if anybody watching this finds my the video of the Ragnarok thing. I actually do a similar speech at the beginning of all my tournaments. I tell everybody what rule set we're playing. I tell them how my heralds are going to be calling because we use shot in motion. When I am running a tournament, it is my tournament in DAG, and there's no written rules. So I tell every fighter present we are using shot in motion. I explain what that means. I go into detail. I tell them same stuff. We have a rule in my whole herald team. It is you have about a second in it, maybe 2. To call garb, light, or hit, or we're calling it for you. If it hits your garb or light and it's not, and you don't tell us immediately, well, I don't know that, I'm calling your arm, it counts. I tell all of my fighters that that's how this is running. And so I inform all of them at the beginning that I expect their communication. Mm-hmm. But the big thing after that is after you start it, while people can be loud, it's we all know what a customer service voice is. Yeah. And as a herald, you have to maintain it. I've pulled heralds off because they've lost their temper. Heralds can't lose their temper, but players also can't lose their temper. And a lot of it comes from there are a lot of people on both sides in the past where people have either had ride-ins with bad heralds, people that are obviously working for their friends, people that are not going to make a call. If we've all been in a fight where we've seen the herald present and we're they're not going to be able to keep up with the speed of combat. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so we know that, and it's it's just because things go fast, like you said, and then seeing that and then getting cheating by the person in front of you, is. I had a thought here and I lost it.
Well, I'll buy you some time. Awesome. I'll buy you some time. I have had situations where I've had a call called on me that I didn't necessarily agree with, and earlier on in my Amped Guard career, it would make me mad, and now when it happens, I kind of just go, I need to fight more clean so that this isn't an issue in the future. To quote someone that we both know, you got to be beyond reproach, and I mean. It's very true, though. You got to fight. When that happens, I go, well, I just got to do that cleaner because I don't want that to ever be a question in the future.
I found my pen is the big thought is that it's a two-sided street. So fighter, I understand we all have had a history of something with someone, but if I as a fighter treat every herald that calls something on me okay, herald, cool, thank you, whether I agree with it or not, and every herald talks with calm assertiveness.
Yeah. Right.
I'm going to say this because if you screech at me while I am being very calm, that is not going to get a good reaction out of your fighter. If I understand you in a team tournament you have to be screeching you're dead because it's loud, there's a lot going on. Yeah. But in a 1v1 tournament, if you scream somebody's dead at them outside of they're obviously not hearing you and you have made other small attempts, that's excessive. I've seen people that they're so eager to tell somebody something that they're forgetting the fact that they might not even need them. Mm-hmm. And because it's such a two-way street. And so you have to build that rep yourself as a fighter and as a herald. So for people that want to be new good heralds, they need to be you need to not lose your temper. You need to be able to calmly tell somebody this, hey, you got hit in the hip. No need to yell, hey, he got you here. Wait, as soon as they break, hey, did he hit you here? And here's the fun fact about that. If you're calling between two fighters, even medium level fighters, because our medium level is much higher than it used to be. Mm-hmm. If I see look like somebody got the wrap, and then the person that threw the shot goes, no, I didn't hit him. That happens way more often than you think.
Yeah.
Like you talked about your guys' exchange. Your job at that point is not to say that because the person getting hit hasn't even said anything. They haven't said yes or no. But if the first words out of the guy swinging the shot says no, I didn't get him. Guy obviously didn't want to hit. He knew his land didn't land. You just saw something that you wanted to see.
Yeah, you're a reeve, not an umpire.
Right. It's the same reason why you don't screech at people, because if you're screaming, you're usually yelling in the middle of an exchange. And then you're going to interrupt the exchange. Mm-hmm. If you call a shot, you wait for the break. As soon as swords are here, you can stop a fight. There. But I've seen a lot of that'll stop a mid grind. Two people are banging it out, dude, and then if there are times where obviously you've been hit and you need to be getting yelled at. But if it's not 100% clear, let the exchange happen, and then there's gonna be a pretty quick break point. Most people only swing 4 or 5 times, I promise.
Yeah, you bring up 2 really big points, and one of them is as a reeve, you have to understand that. I think my mic fell because of the broken thing.
You're good.
So you have to understand that when you make a call, that you're not inherently calling somebody a cheater. And whenever you're a player, you have to understand that you're not inherently being called a cheater, right? Because the moment that someone takes that, is when the defensiveness happens or something like that. So you really have to pay attention to your approach to when you're making a call. The other thing is I forgot because I got distracted by the mic.
No, I mean, that's kind of what One Joe said. And if people listening who are regular listeners of our show skip that episode, you absolutely owe it to yourself to go back and listen.
Yeah,
but
really cool guy.
One Joe talked a lot about the pace of our game and the sort of overall speed of how our game processes. And it's going to be different for every person. So Reeves are not necessarily accusing you of cheating. They're helping everybody stay at the same speed.
And like I said earlier, like I started this with nobody is perfect.
Bingo.
Like everybody, every single person, I don't care how clean you are, you have missed something. Something, somewhere, somehow. Like adrenaline is a real thing and it produces a lack of feeling.
Yeah.
Yep.
I remember one of the first big events that I went to. I was, for those that aren't AmpGuard listeners that are doing it, we have our spell balls and stuff. I got hit in the back with a fireball, which was instant death back then. I guess it still is. And I didn't feel it. Like one of my buddies was like, "Hey man, hey Flo, you got hit way back here. None of that shit you just now did counted." I was like, "Oh, well now I feel really bad." But then they had the same. This was like young Flo. They had the exact same talk with me. They're like, "Hey man, you're not a cheater. Nobody thinks you're a cheater, but you did get hit with that fireball, and your body was roasted to a crisp, and your skeleton just kept walking forward."
Yeah. I mean, this is like people have it's weird to see that conversation shift because for a long time people wanted some kind of heal that could be made into a ball and thrown. And now the counter to that is nobody feels spell balls when they hit them wearing armor or, when they hit them from behind. If it's not thrown hard enough, they don't feel it. So it's interesting to see that change.
I mean, like one personal thing, like one thing I do notice with and I will say that this is very prevalent in AmpGuard, is that when I go to AmpGuard, oftentimes I'm with my friends, and most of us have universal kits, which means that our arrows are dag arrows. And if you've seen the difference between an arrow, a dag arrow, and an AmpGuard arrow, they're massive.
Yeah. Dag is much safer.
I straight up, I can't shoot the average person in the back with a dag arrow. Like, if I do not, full draw them within, 30 feet, I have the amount of times I've, long shot somebody, 60 feet plus.
Yeah.
And watched an arrow hit somebody and then watched them just keep sprinting, and I can't get their attention. It's because our arrows don't hit as hard.
Yeah.
They've got a big faux pad on the front, for those of you that don't know, because we could shoot each other in the face. And it's just the difference in the pressure. And it's always people in armor. It's I understand the difference in it. And it's because they're expecting that thunk versus being aware of a lighter touch.
Yep. Mm-hmm. I was in leather armor at the time too. So yeah.
But it goes back to just being aware that nobody's perfect. And if somebody's like, "Hey buddy, don't get mad at it," just be like, "Okay, cool," and go respawn.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the most important factor. You get to respawn, so it's fine.
Don't go into it assuming ill intent, right?
What is it saying? Don't assume ignorance, not maliciousness, or something like that.
Yeah.
Damn it. That's one of the razors where it's like.
Oh yeah,
malice
it's not
where
Occam's, but it's one of those.
Hanlon's
things
razor, whatever. We're gonna get stuck on metaphysics and
Look
philosophy.
At me.
And that's not why people
I don't know
listen.
what razors are. Just look at this.
I don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah, I don't know. It's fine. I want to get away from fighting just a little bit. Not that it's not fun, but a lot of these games have different classes. Obviously, Dag and Bell being kind of outliers there. I know Darkon has some kind of magic system, some kind of class system.
They have their entire game is based on a class system.
Yeah, exactly. So. In these games that do have it, like when you play AmpGuard, what class do you normally play? And when you play Darkon, what do you normally play? Is it just Warrior?
No. So I am actually a giant nerd. Fun fact, I'm a stick jock, but I love that dorky shit.
Most of our stick jocks are giant nerds, as it turns out.
So I my favorite is honestly I love playing wizards. But AmpGuard, I mean I played Druid and Barbarian. Druid was my preferred class to cast. It was way back when, and Druid was way different than it is now.
Now it's better.
And then it's pretty fun. In Darkon, I played Warrior Mage, but it was mostly just because I needed to play a class that could arch, because I've been nursing an injury, and so I did fight a little bit at their events, but it was mostly with a shield covering me in some form, and not aggressive fighting. I did some fighting, but it was mostly sparring. But so my class out there was more based on I want to shoot people because I don't have to hurt myself using a bow. And so I have but their class system is really in depth. They have a lot of really unique skills. It kind of reminds me a lot of the old what's like quest skills that some classes and caster classes used to have in Amp
Yep.
Guard. Like the skills that absolutely had no use in a battle game, but in like the quests and stuff that used to get run were pretty fun. And they do a lot of games like that. Like the day battle I went to, they had like a couple little like scenarios and like a cool little quest thing. And then at their event, they have all kinds of little like different interactions and stuff like that. That the classes all have different abilities that can be used within the game, and they all get some pretty strong abilities. So every class feels pretty impactful. I definitely saw like a good variety of them. Like it wasn't just a bunch of dudes playing one class. Like each class had a representation and obviously had some type of use. And that's something I really like to see within a class system.
Interesting. Jeff, did you remember your thing? We've bought you like 15 minutes.
No, I didn't. No, from what I understand too, to kind of wheel back to where we were at before, is like Xander, we established like put in the tournament culture, but from what I understand, also inside that tournament culture, you spawned a sportsmanship culture as well, and I think that's one of the big things that is kind of lacking. Like we've been watching a lot of disc golf videos and stuff like that for a while, and someone makes a good shot, everybody's like clapping and stuff. But whenever we watch tournaments in Amp Guard, like no one cheers for anybody. It's basically the fight's over and it just goes to the next one, which is really odd in a way.
Fuck that guy.
Yeah, because I don't know. Maybe it's just the one-on-one sports, but I feel like still in like jiu-jitsu and stuff like that, you kind of get some claps and stuff like that for the people well fought and things like that. So I don't know. It's just something that kind of dawned on me.
So I know the difference you're talking about, and I think a lot of it has to do with the presence of how the tournaments are running, like I was talking about earlier.
Yeah.
It's because in Amp Guard, the only people that are interested in the tournaments are the people fighting in the tournaments. And while yes, you can still use a lot of that, like the people in the line could be cheering, but we've all been tournament fighters. Mm-hmm. When you're in the line, you are focused on winning. You are focused on planning out your next setups. You should be focusing on like what your next fight's going to look like, right? You don't have time like necessarily to be focusing and cheering. Yeah, sure, you may look up and see your buddy fight or something. But that's one big thing with DAG is because the tournaments are at night, people are sitting around the ring drinking. Mm-hmm. And so you do get that element of like for example, last year at Winter War, the new Winter War site they're using down in Alabama has a literal like ring with a stand, like a built stand. And so there was like a stadium of people. And like coming down, and so people were like cheering and like people really get into it, and it's because they have the immersion of getting into it. Mm-hmm, right. And so like even at like night tournaments, while necessarily not everyone's cheering, it's not quiet because there's nightlife happening around the tournament. It's like pit fights within the night, so like that atmosphere really helps, I do believe helps like cultivate that. Mm-hmm. Whereas like you're talking about like these people that are cheering, people cheer in DAG tournaments a lot of times. Like if it's they kind of fell out a little bit, but I think the culture itself kind of like slowed down a little bit. Mm-hmm. But in our peak, we were getting fights where like at our night fights, people were like cheering, losing their mind. And like, I think we've gotten towards a lot of like where even the people that are watching the fights, everybody's looking for a cool thing. Mm-hmm. Like everybody, like we definitely have a much better culture now because it's less like antagonistic, I guess I want to say, where it's like, oh, that person just did that thing. Like when I'm watching and like watching fights, I don't care who does the cool thing. I just want to see people do a cool thing. Like at Darkon, they had this like night tournament and they had like this night fit, and man, people were getting goofy, but people were like, I saw some great fights. Like I saw people having fun and doing some really just like fun stuff. They were having fun fighting, and that's what it should be. Like, yes, it can be competitive but competition can be fun, but you don't necessarily have to be smiling the whole time. Right. But you should always have that in your mind, that like that friendly competitive spirit, like you talked about, like that sportsmanship. But you really have to learn that, and you have to learn that by seeing it. Mm-hmm. And so we've been able to get it because so many people have like fell into the belief of, yes, if everybody has fun, we all have more fun.
Mm-hmm. It's funny you mentioned so I have a goofy story. At a recent tournament at Buccaneers Respite, Teflon and I both were in it was a fairly small tournament, 10 to 12 people max. And I was trying to, while standing in line, I was trying to make a positive comment about every fight. So whether that was like, ooh, good shot, or great call, or good honor, anything like that, as people were fighting. Like, even though I'm working my way up the line, I'm trying to like note when people do things well and be positive. And it got stuck in my head so much that when people killed me, I was like, good shot, thank you. And then walking to the back of the line, because that was just like, I have to make a comment on every fight, even if it's mine. So, or I would kill somebody and go, good shot, wait, sorry, cabbage, okay, next up.
To echo that though, I've actually seen like some of like, especially some of like younger up and comer fighters where that's like their whole culture with each other. Like if you lose to them, you're not like, when you see them lose, they're not like mad at the person that beat them. They get more mad at themselves, and then but they're like, that was a good shot.
Yeah,
like
show
in
me
the
how you did
Darkon,
that, you know?
in the Bellum tournaments, I saw people lose to things, and they would like, they were upset that they lost, but they weren't mad that they lost.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, and I saw that sportsmanship a lot more, where it was like, oh, you got me, like,
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
instead of like, oh, you know, F you, you know, losing your temper and stuff like that. But that also, that whole culture comes from, like, not to echo back to being a clean culture, but it comes from creating a clean fighting culture. Fighting culture is becoming more clean than it's ever been. And that makes it easier to be sportsmanship. Because if I beat you and I know that I didn't hit you, like, and I know that like I can believe our exchange was honest, that makes staying in a positive mindset easier. And so if everybody is being honest, it makes keeping that mindset. Whereas like it can be rough, but you have to do it. It can be rough being like, to the person that you like, if you felt like you got cheated. Like if you felt like that person blatantly cheated you, and then trying to be nice to them afterwards is very difficult. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not good at it. I'm say honest. Like if I like feel like I really got cheated, I'll be like, all right, good fight, GG. I'll like still like try to GG, tap gloves, but I don't really want to like talk about it.
Yeah.
Whereas like every time I lose a fight and I like know I lost the fight, it's very easy to be like, you got me. Good shot, good one. Like, you know, and it keeps that environment, but that environment is everybody's responsibility. It's no one person's individual thing, but everybody is individually responsible for it.
Yeah, and a lot of times this stuff grows. Like you mentioned, we talked about the kind of training up your heralds, your reeves in Amtgard, but then that also lends another level of credibility to these people coming in and the sportsmanship being able to grow when you start getting trust that your reeves are going to call things. You know that they are going to the best of their ability, call this fight as well as they can. Then when I go into it and, you know, if it's one of these guys that I'm fighting and I throw a shot and go, oh man, I think that landed, and then they kill me, I go, good shot, man, because those are my friends, right? And I have a level of trust that we're going to have a clean exchange. Well, then having good reeves there allows me to extend that level of trust to people that I don't know and that wouldn't normally get it. It's a compounding windfall for better culture in fighting overall, I think.
Yeah, it also starts at like a top level to a degree, right? So when your top fighters are doing things like that, your middle to lower end fighters also see them and think that that's part of the culture. I was going to ask Xander about, like, with your reeves or heralds, when you were setting it up, were you looking for some of the higher end fighters to come in and do it? But that, you know, that's kind of has its own problems of like stealing their time away from them to some degree and things like that too.
Like,
So
you mean getting them to herald for me?
yeah.
Oh, so like, I mean, granted, it is probably because of my reputation and like people know that like my organization worked. And so I actually never had a hard time having high-end fighters for me. Most of the time, for most of my tournaments, would have a handful of fighters that were either exhausted from the day, they didn't want to fight in tournaments that night or something, and I'd just be like, hey man, I'd ask them nicely and they would help me. It's amazing what kindness can do for the world.
No joke.
And so it really does help, but you don't want to take your friends away that you know are there to fight in a tournament. Like if you drove here to fight in a tournament, but that's another thing that I was pushing like really heavily is that you're regionally responsible for your tournament scene, I believe. And so like I think that like the big regional events like Winter War and stuff like that is great to like watch the high end units like really duke it out and like really like strive for that competition to see who's the top fighters this year, right? But your smaller events and your weekend events should be being run by like your fighters. So like, you're the big stick unit in this region. So like in Maryland, I'll use a good example. In Darkon, it's no quarter. At Bellum, no quarter ran the tournaments. It's in Winter War. It's Winter Wars was like I did that for a long time, but I also did a lot of the East Wind ran 2 events a year. I usually heralded both of those tournaments. And then I would pool the locals. So at those tournaments, it's not that hard to get a son to herald because a lot of them don't fight and they can keep up with the combat. And so we had these good things. And then one pin at you, the stuff you were talking about earlier about building those reputations, is that people don't realize how much they're being watched when they're fighting tournaments. So for newer people, you're worried about losing a tournament because you took a shot that you feel was late or something like that. But you don't really realize that the amount of people that when you take a shot, when the other guy's like, oh, I didn't hit you. And you're like, no, yes, you did. You're taking in charge of your own honor. Yeah. People don't realize how many people see that. Oh, so when I see somebody I don't know and I'm we were talking about extending that trust to strangers. If I see somebody and they're like, no, you absolutely got me. I see them arguing with someone about why they lost.
I'm dead.
Those are my favorite.
Really that shows so much about your character because it shows that you're more committed to your honor than your victory, which is what, that's how you extend that scene. And the more people that end up doing that, the more that we've grown. Like you said, it's infectious. It's because fun is infectious. When people are smiling, people want to keep doing that. And that's why we talked about earlier about shaming. That's why it works, is because you're stopping the fun. Nobody wants to stop the fun at its very core. Nobody really wants to do that. And so if the fun is based in the thing, you have automatically included more in that. And I've seen people that get ridiculous with it. I think the people that throw their the funny temper tantrums, oh dang it and stuff like that when they lose. I think that shit does so much good for the culture. Yeah. Because it shows that you can have fun losing. Wild concept, but you can.
Yeah, I've used this phrase before, originally inspired by Michael Hammer of God in my life, but you can create it only takes a few people to create an environment where hatred and anger cannot survive. And that's really what you're doing.
I remember my point. Stopping the fights mid.
Holy shit!
Let him get through it.
Yeah, right. Stopping the fights in the mid of the grind and everything is so bad because you've now influenced the outcome of the tournament effectively, and you don't want to do that as a Reeve when it comes to the point of making a call. Let it kind of settle and then replay everything for them, and that was it pretty much.
All we had to do was buy you 23 minutes of time.
I know, right?
Easy.
Doing those steps are really important. And one thing we used to do is I would tell people to go home and practice. For a lot of the heralds that we help train, is I would tell them just go watch people fight. Go watch people fight, see what they call on each other, and see how the exchanges happen. And then that just literally just trains your eyes to keep up and learn all the different types of exchanges. But then also, if the fighters are educating themselves to all understand everything, it makes everything smoother. Back to the point of,
absolutely.
We're all in this together.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that I could probably talk to you about this for hours and hours on end. I know that Jeff can. And Lucas could text with you about it forever. He doesn't really like talking on the phone.
I have anxiety. It's fine.
But we're about at time. I want to give you a chance. Do you have a funny, or crazy story that you'd like to share? Something that
you can tell about Flo.
Yeah, no, not about Flo. The statute of limitations is not up on most of those. So, but this is the type of story that you and your buddies in your unit still laugh about today. Something super memorable. That does not fall within the statute of limitation. That's a really important one.
And also, it's got to have the express written consent of the National Football League
and Fox News, I think. Yeah, or
Fox
no, Fox
News. Fuck off.
Yeah, no,
they
sorry,
can eat
it's
my
Fox,
dick.
not Fox News.
Okay,
I forgot.
It's always the hardest question. We can tell you an hour and something before we start, and it's
I know.
still
I've been
never
thinking
fresh.
about it the whole time, and I haven't come up with nothing.
Oh God.
Anything crazy happened to you while you were traveling to an event or back from it?
I mean,
Couch surfing.
I mean, I've couch surfed a lot of places, but I would say that it's so dumb. But it's honestly, to this day, it's the craziest story, and you guys know the story, and that's the worst part. That's why I wanted to come up with something else.
Well, the thing is,
It's not even about me. It was just getting to witness it. It was my very first Knoblander. And so do you guys remember the story of the dude swimming up creek in the ghillie suit and jumping out of the water with a crossbow?
I'm sorry.
Heard that, yeah.
So I'm there staying with friends. Don't have a lot of people, just my local dudes. And we're standing on a flag point.
Before you start out, very, very quick, what is Knoblander for the people that may not have been?
Knoblander was one of AmpGuard's, for me, the first events that they did like 24-hour class games. So it was a class battle, and it was like 36 hours. And so for like, this was before I got into LARP. So it was literally, I showed up and I did not stop fighting for 36 hours because I was young and dumb.
Damn.
And it was just class games constantly. Like it was one continual game. Like you had a way to get lives back. Like it was back when we had life counts.
Yeah.
Ooh.
I miss those sometimes.
I had only been in the game. I was in a game long enough to be like I think it was like a level 5 barbarian at the time. So like I wasn't even level 6 and nothing. But it was just a fun weekend long event. And the first night, we were put on like a flag guard duty for like the CTF stuff. And me and 2 of my friends are just standing there waiting. We're just hanging out talking. And we hear a splash. And we're like, all right, whatever. Like we've been hearing frogs all night. We're next to a creek. And some motherfucker swam up creek in a ghillie suit. Like goggles, full coverage, everything. With a crossbow. Came up out of the water, shot my friend, loaded a crossbow, shot the other one, and just did it again to me and just shot all 3 of us in the chest because we were just stunned. We were just like, and just rapid succession, and we were all just like, well, all right, we're dead. Because he called all his fancy assassin moves, and we were just like, all right, well, I ain't got nothing.
It's got a crossbow. I'm going to go.
Everybody failed their shaken check.
Yeah.
Everybody. But, like, it was just, it's one of the, like, wildest things, like, that's reasonable.
No, completely understandable.
Yeah. But there honestly, LARPing has so many different, like, unique experiences that, like, it's hard to LARP without getting crazy stories.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like...
No, I think Crossbow Story is fantastic. Do we have anything else before we... Oh, I have a thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't mean to set myself up there. I genuinely didn't realize I had a thing until I started talking. So as some folks who watch may know, we are doing a fundraiser for St. Jude Children's Hospital.
Yep.
Because of some donors, we actually went through our $500 goal super quick. We are going to keep that up and running for the remainder of the month, so anybody who wants to donate can. But huge thank you to all the people who donated, because we busted through that way quicker than I thought we would have.
Yeah. Really big shout out to the donors there. This is directly through St. Jude. We talked about it on an earlier episode, this is it's a really good cause. It's helping end childhood cancer and things like that. So. I know that with the holidays coming up, it might not be easy. If you do have anything to give, please do. Links will be in the description. You can give as little as $1. Every single dollar does help. It absolutely helps.
Speaking of plugging things, Xander, you got anything you want to plug there, man?
Yep.
You got a Twitch stream or something?
No, man. I'm a giant introvert. That's the secret. I get all of my extrovert energy at events.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Plug LARPing. Go find a LARP near you.
Yeah, right.
Oh. Was that another plug for Come Try LARP, you say?
It absolutely was a plug for Come Try LARP. All right. Well, Xander, thank you so much for your time. I'm going to hit this outro. Hey, everyone. Thanks for listening. If you liked what you heard, be sure to subscribe to our podcast on YouTube or Spotify to get notified about new episodes. And make sure to follow us on Facebook for announcements and more.